Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to business continuity, risk, disaster recovery, resilience, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Today's show, we're going to have, at least the first part, is going to be quite the lesson for me, because we're going to talk about a subject I haven't touched on at all in almost 6 years of doing this. And I want to welcome to the show the author of How to Not Kill Your Business, Erika Andresen. Erika, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you to your listeners.
And believe it or not, you were recommended to me by a previous guest.
Yes.
Brendan Monahan.
Yes.
Yes. Said you're an avid marathoner, if I recall.
Well, what's avid? I mean, I'm not running 2-hour marathons, but I've done 6 or 7 at this point. I'm going to be doing Chicago. I did New York twice. I did Boston, the Marine Corps Marathon. So
wow, and I can only dream about running around the block.
More than one. I don't know. I really don't want to call it avid, but I've done enough.
Well, it's great to have you here on the show. Now, I know you and I have touched base a couple of times through email and had a quick chat as well. Can you take a minute or two and tell us about yourself, what you do, and how you got into what we do?
Sure. So Erika Andresen, I am a lot of things. I'm a recovering lawyer, because I used to practice corporate law. And then I'm a veteran. I went to do active duty JAG for almost a decade. And then I left that and became an entrepreneur and started my own consulting company for business continuity and resilience. At the same time, I became a professor of emergency management for the graduate Masters of Public Administration program at the University of Texas in El Paso. And I wrote a book. So that in simple is what I am, who I am, right? How I got here is basically when I was in the military. We have what we call the PCS season, so permanent change of station. So when every summer we have a lot of change of staff, and we lost 8 lawyers and we got 4. And because I was a lawyer in my previous career and not just, new, they said, "Hey, Erika, you're going to take 4 jobs." And I was like, okay, great. And one of them was an EOC legal advisor. And they go, "Don't worry about it. You're only going to have to go to 1 meeting a quarter. It won't be anything." And then 2 weeks later, there was torrential rain, 2 inches of rain a night for like a week, created a state of emergency around the installation. The installation was flooded. The town was flooded. The interstate was flooded for a couple of, exits. And I was like, wow, I kind of really like what this is all about and helping out here. And I wanted to do more like it and decided to get my own MPA. It was being offered at a university nearby. So I did that. In the event if I ever got out of the military, I could do something like that. And it turned out that every one of my duty stations after that, I had some kind of touch with emergency management. So it just stayed in my blood. And then I saw at a certain point that there was no reason these types of principles could not be applied to businesses. In addition to the fact that the military practices continuity of operations every single day. It's a 24/7 international organization that needs to run on a very critical mission. And continuity of operations is basically business continuity.
Yeah. I understand from the book, that's the military's term for it.
Yes.
I remember we used to have that when I first started, but it, 26 years ago, but it disappeared rather quickly because everybody wanted their own terminology.
Right. So, and I just want to be clear, because you mentioned because of the book, you knew what continuity of operations is. That's only like in the intro. I do not use hardly any industry terms unless I need to, because I wanted to appeal to the people who don't know business continuity by and large, and who need to know it, and it's the small and mid-sized business owners.
Yeah, and you do add humor in here too. There is some funny stuff in here, so I'm kind of looking forward to talking to you, because I got a feeling there's probably going to be some humor here too. So. Well, welcome to the show. I'm glad you were able to be a part of this. And I said I'm going to get schooled today, because I've wanted to have someone on the show to talk about business continuity and legal, how they work together, how they don't work together, the benefits, everything about it. and it's been very difficult for me to find someone to talk about it. So my question to you, and for the record, I did provide Erika some questions. See, I'm not afraid to make myself look stupid. And she had a funny comment going, wow, I'm going to school you on legal and business continuity, based on the questions that I gave her. So I'm not going to even touch any of those questions. So why don't we just start off with a basic one? Legal is often seen as an afterthought in business continuity, but it's not. How can we benefit by working with legal?
There's so much. There's a wide range of first where legal fits within business continuity. So if you are a larger company, normally you have a legal department. That is one of the integral departments you need to be engaging in addition to finance and sales and operations and HR to do your business continuity plan for your company. Now, one of the really big parts of a legal attorney's job within business continuity is a lot about regulatory compliance. So they're the ones who are making sure that the companies are adhering to what they need to. So they're not getting fined, they're not getting shut down, they're not doing something out of regulations. Because again, every time there's some type of, usually it's with a change of political leadership. So where it happened not too long ago where the Supreme Court decided to remove a certain thing from the EPA, a certain power. And then everyone's like, okay, we don't need to do this anymore. But then Congress goes, no, wait, Supreme Court, we're putting this back in. So then it was a law. So then they had to revert back to that. So having lawyers to be able to make sure that you are able to be continuous based off of that type of disruption, not the disaster, because everybody assumes that when they're like, oh, business continuity is disasters, it's also disruptions, which have nothing to do with natural disasters, of course. The other thing is from now we're going to step out of the business continuity specific role and look at what legal does for business continuity, having nothing to do with regulatory compliance. So one of the things that people need to be concerned with, if you're a company, you have a board of directors. A board of directors have a fiduciary duty to the company and the shareholders, where it is, it's to do no harm, but to also put the profits of the company, not their own personal profits, ahead of, like, the interest of the company is ahead of their own personal profits. And if you decide to skimp on in getting cybersecurity or some type of business continuity plan or management, then that can be seen as a dereliction of your duty or fiduciary duty to take care of it, because you're not spending money on that program, which means that you're getting compensated more because there's more money to compensate you. So that's one factor, is shareholder derivative actions. And there were certain, during the pandemic, Tyson Food Company had a shareholder derivative action completely based on how they responded to the pandemic. They said that they responded too slow. They weren't taking it seriously. So they caused a lot of the employees to get sick and have to shut down the factories. So they blamed the decisions of the board of directors in what they did. So it's not just about whether or not you have a business continuity plan, it's how you respond to a disaster in the moment. So that's something that companies do need to think about. Additionally, there's a whole other subset of things like force majeure clauses. Now, in every single contract, there is a force majeure clause. And it pretty much says, I get out of my obligation to perform a duty under this contract to you without penalty, because due to some circumstances that were not foreseen and beyond my control, I can't do this. And originally, back in the day, it was acts of God. And then it became natural disasters and fires and floods, because these things are not necessarily caused by an act of God. Now they're like man-made issues. And then they started adding war and terrorism and cyber hackers. And, then they also started adding labor strikes. So these are also things that are very integral to business continuity, like labor strikes as part of supply chain management. And cyber, you have your vandals. These are domestic terrorists who want to vandalize infrastructure, critical infrastructure. That's also going to impact you. And whether or not that excuses you from performance. So when you have a third-party vendor, which is weird, when you look at a force majeure clause saying, you know what, we may be completely operational and fine and in tip-top condition, but one of our suppliers is having an issue, and because of that, we don't have to perform our contract. So I have been talking to a lot of people about tearing apart every single line. And first of all, most people don't know what a force majeure clause is. They don't even know that's in a contract. And I read everything. Even at the DMV, they're like, hey, you just need to sign this. I go, okay. And I'm staring at the guy. No, just sign here. I go, no, it's a legal document. I'm going to read it and then I will sign it. And he's like, no one ever does that. I'm like, okay, great. Yeah, but like finding the force majeure clause, it's a lot of times it's in terms and conditions. It might even be under warranty. It's going to be both in both places. It'll have the same types of provisions. And then when you could tear apart what actually they're telling you as the contracting party, these things that business continuity should take care of are going to prevent them from having to perform their contract.
Well, I've got a couple of questions for you. One is the regulatory and compliance. I think a lot of people believe that that's what audit was doing, but that's not the case.
It is that you're auditing to see if you're in line with, but you're also, how do I put this? Their audits are done at times. Now, I'm rusty when it comes to corporate law. I haven't done corporate law since 2011. Audits are done on a timed basis. So like every quarter, every month, depending on the industry. If it's when the SEC, they continually come out with something new, usually every March, April. So it's about compliance with that. But again, if you're only looking to one regulatory body, so like say the SEC, if then the Supreme Court does something, you're not paying attention to that overrules the SEC. Like it needs to be on a more continuous basis, not necessarily a full audit of everything that's in place. So more proactive in that regard.
So is that fair to say that a lawyer could be a part of the audit group, or that the audit group and the legal arm of the company should be working together with business continuity, like everybody interacting, not just either or?
Yes. So I'll give you an example. When I was in the military, and this happens even in companies, because everybody sees legal as this separate entity. It's like, oh, legal's over there. When I was a JAG officer, and it's fair, we're definitely different types of people, very strange in a lot of regards. Not the most social either, but I'm a social butterfly, surprisingly, right? And I wanted to learn more about what was going on, not just did I get this, assignment, do it, hand it off. I'm also a person who likes to work smarter, not harder. So I got to know the departments I needed to liaise with and do work for. And instead of having to bang my head against the desk and figure out the answer to a question, because I had a relationship with these people in departments within the division I worked in, I was able to be like, hey, I have a question. And they're like, oh, hey, Erika, sure. Here's the answer. I'm like, great, thank you. And certainly you build those wonderful relationships by cross-talking with other stakeholders and shareholders within the organization. Mm-hmm. But then you're seen as approachable. And I think that also makes you have a more robust and thorough product when you're interacting with other people. And the other thing I would do is I said, I like to work smarter, not harder. When I was advising individual clients for even small claims court type of appearances, I wanted them to understand everything. And if I could explain it to them in a way they understood, then they could help me build their case for them. If I'm using big words because I have a couple letters after my name, because, clearly, that all that does is make me look like I'm pompous and I can win some kind of trivia contest because I have a large vocabulary. That doesn't mean I'm actually smart, doesn't mean I'm actually intelligent, doesn't mean I can actually communicate and impart knowledge upon people. If I can do that by talking to somebody like a regular person, I don't understand why people don't understand how simplifying communication so everybody has a part in it just makes everything run more smoothly and better.
Yeah. Now, here's an experience I had the other day. We were filling out a questionnaire from a city government asking about our business continuity, disaster recovery, capabilities, etc. We did it, and we were told, now you have to send it to legal. Almost everyone in the room or on the call had their eyes kind of go, roll their eyes. Mm-hmm. So how can you approach a group like that when everybody is seeing legal already as either a roadblock or an issue, like an issue. They're an issue. Oh, great. Now they're going to do this or that or whatever. So how can you approach them to build that relationship to try and get rid of that feeling?
I think it's because it's an unknown and people will buy into whatever they were told before. So when I was training somebody to take over my position when I was leaving to go to a different location, we were at a meeting. I said, just come along with me. This is what we're doing at this meeting. He's like, okay. And then someone's like, anybody have any questions? And he raised his hand. And the question he asked, I realized was just going off on a lark because he was just personally curious about something that had nothing to do with legal. And I gave him a very stern talking to afterwards. I said, don't ever do that in a meeting like this with all these other sections, because the second legal raises their hand, they think, uh-oh, something's wrong. And you're just curious what this is. That is something you ask offline after the meeting to the person you want to ask. Don't ever ask that in a meeting. You're wasting people's time. You're getting them nervous for no reason. And that's because he didn't know them. They knew me. So if I was asking, they could tell if there's something wrong or I'm just asking questions, but I also wouldn't prolong meetings by asking superfluous questions anyway. But when you have that relationship and you understand, like, oh, this is what you do. Oh, this is how you are. Oh, I can understand this now. It shatters the illusions and allows you to have that type of relationship where you can talk to them and not be afraid and not be like, oh God. And even I'm like, God, I hate lawyers because I was one. I can say it, right? And like one of my favorite little cartoons, it's a guy at a desk, handing another guy a folder. He's like, run this by legal, but run real fast so ethics doesn't see it. Which I'm a big fan of that. It's like, yeah, nobody wants to run by legal. Because we are the killjoys. That's we killjoy in everything. I even had people say to me, and I fought back with some lawyers when I was prosecuting, the way you draft charges. Somebody kicked it back to me because I said which instead of I can't remember the exact word I used, but it was like really semantics. It was a thesaurus flip of the dime. And he's like, don't say this, say this. I said, don't waste time and prolong this process by kicking something back because you prefer to use this word over this word when they mean the same damn thing. And that person was acting like a lawyer. And it's like, you perpetuate the stereotype, like, just get the work done. Who cares whether it's this word or that word? Just get it done.
And I guess it doesn't help when you see Hollywood, make movies and TV shows that kind of build on that stereotype, so to speak. Really.
Yeah. And I mean, there's some pretty good, I'm actually going through Suits right now because somebody had told me when I was deployed, hey, you ever watch Suits? And I said, no. They go, well, the main guy, you remind me of him. He's such a-hole, but in a good way. I was like, okay, thanks. And I started watching it. And you're like, you know what? I'm not offended. He's actually a pretty decent guy.
My next question relates back to the force majeure clause and pieces. You gave some examples there, floods, earthquakes, and things like that. In the business continuity industry and disaster recovery, whatever you want to call it, there's always talk about making sure that we identify our risks and what our impacts are going to be, regardless of what the trigger is. The flood can come from a river, a lake, rain, sprinklers, anything. So how do you reconcile what is force majeure and what isn't when we're supposed to be working on developing risk mitigation strategies and factors and response plans so that we are prepared, and yet we have a force majeure to fall back on? It almost kind of feels as though, do I really need to worry about all this planning if I've got a force majeure contract or clause?
So one of the arts of getting legal involved is so you don't get sued. So you can have a force majeure clause, which gets you out. And then if somebody doesn't agree with it, they can sue and say that it was an improper application of the force majeure clause. And then you'll have the judiciary who's going to look at it. And, there's a test. And the test is, was this a foreseeable event? And then did you do things that were reasonable to prevent or mitigate the damage so you did not have this problem? If you're a business in Florida, hurricanes are foreseeable. And if you've done nothing to prepare, then that is not reasonable behavior. So you'll be found as like, no, you still have to perform or you're going to lose money on that. The other thing is you have to worry about is when you do contract, you may say, I agree to, or I promise to provide this much of service. If you are impacted by a disaster disruption that caused you to kick off a force majeure, or you can't perform, there is a legal contractual treaties that it's called frustration of purpose. So that's an addition or a different venue, or it's a doctrine of impossibility for frustration of purpose, or doctrine of impossibility that says, because of an event, I can't provide what I promised you because of these things. And they can say, actually, no, it's the way you decided to divvy up your remaining supply to your current clients that prevented my client from getting their fair share, or a degradation of service. This is another thing that legal needs to be thinking, like getting involved in. This is why I think business continuity professionals and legal should become besties, because it's not just about the regulatory compliance. It's about, where are there dangers here? Where are the parameters? Where can we where we have exposure, and limit that exposure, both from a legal perspective and also from a business continuity perspective.
Yeah, I like that piece. The help identify dangers and gaps, because we will have obviously our perceptions and our viewpoints that we want to address, and we have our standards and guidelines and things like that. The legal could come from another direction and see it completely different. And say, hey, did you think of this and this? You identified some great stuff, but from this angle, what about this, this, and this? That's really a good point.
And but that's how I also do business continuity. So as you read in my book, one of my pre-readers turned into basically a case study where I was like, okay, I'm going to ask you these questions like I'm a 5-year-old. I need you to explain to me, how do you make icing? And like, I know how to make icing basically, but all these, it's like, people who do business continuity to other people, it's not an act, right? But it's not a punishment. If you're the person who needs a business continuity plan, you're too close to it. You know your business way too intimately, too much. You can't filter right. You cannot edit your own paper. That's why you need someone to come in and start asking. When I ask what sounds like really simple questions, and I always give credit to the movie Philadelphia, when Denzel Washington says over and over again, as a lawyer, so explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And I will say that, explain to me like a 5-year-old, how do you do this? What about this? And if I break it down to such a level where people are like, no, that's so simple, I don't even think about that anymore. It's like, that's where you're missing everything. That's where you have exposure, because you're like, oh. And you should see the faces of these people where it's like, I can't believe I didn't even think about that. So obvious. I'm like, but it's not, because you see it every day. And the things that you see every day, it just becomes a blur in the background.
Yeah, I learned that years ago. It's called the curse of knowledge. Sometimes you don't know that you haven't covered something because you know something so well that it just glosses over something. You don't even realize you're glossing over it,
right?
Or that you've skipped it because it's just so natural for you that your knowledge doesn't pick up all those little details or nuances that others would notice, going, well, wait, I don't get the link. Well, the link is so obvious. Well, yeah, it is for you because you know it, but it's not for me because I don't know it.
Right. Or it's like with muscle memory kind of stuff. If you're like, well, how did you tell me every step you took to get to work today? And it's like, well, I drove to work. No, every step. Did you walk out the door? Which thing did you lock first? Yeah. I don't know, because it's just so rote at this point. And that's where, the devils are in the details. And this is where the lawyers come in and say this and that. And that's the other thing fun about lawyers. Somebody was asking me about a quote the other day, not of a movie, of like a quote for doing business. And I said, I'm a lawyer. I'm going to tell you, it depends, because I can't give you a quote unless I know the full left and right parameters of this. I can give you a number. This number is a fiction until I get more information to fill it in. So most everything is, it depends.
Yeah, I tell people, it depends is an acceptable answer, and so is I don't know.
Right.
Acceptable. Okay, now we know where we stand.
But we like in the military, I don't know, but I'll get that answer for you.
Yes. Yeah. What every CIO likes to hear. If they don't have you don't have the answer for them, tell them that. Well, we've come to the end of our first segment, Erika. This was great. It was great to hear some different perspectives, and I'm so glad we got to talk about legal today. And I know in our second segment, we're going to change gears a little bit more, and we're going to address another subject that hasn't been broached very much. So I'm looking forward to that too. We're talking with Erika Andresen today, author of How to Not Kill Your Business. And we will be right back. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.